For as long as I have existed on the internet, I have been known affectionately as the Witchman. So it's only right that I would play and become a fan of the incredible 50 million copy selling adventure game known worldwide as The Witcher 3, one of the top 69 games ever made, starring the White Wolf, Geralt of Labia. Officially known as The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt for Women, Geralt the G begins his search for the fair maiden loins in the year 1272, slaying many ladies, monsters, and lady monsters, on his way to becoming a fabled video game protagonist on par with his novel counterpart. For a game set in the medieval past with a largely emotionless protagonist, Witcher 3 is one of the most lively and compelling works in all of video game fantasy. A truly bold and daring adventure game that spares no effort in realizing a sundry and mature Middle Ages narrative with no regard for censorship of the so-called controversial. By the time that you complete the first main quest line and conclude the Bloody Baron storyline, it becomes clear why The Witcher 3 is the kind of game that is easily called great. Witcher 3's opening sets the tone for the type of world and people that a convincing dark mythology must house within its four walls. Our hero, taking a brief respite from his rabble-rousing, beast-cleansing journey, takes a scrub in the intimate comfort of his lady's chamber. He's treated to beautiful banquets and appetizing views fit for a champion. Yet even while making himself at home, he is not safe from the scorn of the opposite sex. He is unperturbed by the pain of his prick and the perilous clasp of a crab of sorcery. The toppler of titties and ghouls fears no man or beast, but even a monster hunter must yield in the face of an enterprising temptress or two, for what both men and women want cannot be quenched by spells and swords, but by arms and legs and the exchange of natural fluids. It's in this complex dilemma of sexual tension that The Witcher 3 keeps its humanity despite all of the mutations necessary in transforming a fable, because the most interesting aspect of any story will always be the drama of human relationships. Though many of the protagonists wield magical powers, even the ability to bend time itself, the unsolvable mystery that even Detective Geralt's Witcher senses struggle to ascertain is the nature of women. In balancing his powers and his responsibility, a Witcher must also keep his love life in check, as well as whatever emotions remain to him. Geralt cannot cry, or won't, because he's been made into a savage killing machine. But he knows love and loss and understands principles, if not morals. The Butcher of Blaviken is no stranger to enemies, nor does he shy away from looking after his allies. Geralt is very blunt and decisive, which is what we want from this kind of trusty protagonist in this precarious setting. Our Witcher is a stoic character, yet vulnerable, with wounds deeper than the countless lacerations of his battle scars. Smart, humorous in some of the driest of situations, successful due to his reliance on instinct and diplomacy. Compared to a litany of other action hero badasses, Geralt is tame and earthly, which makes him more believable and the evolving story more grounded. This comportment of the protagonist serves the RPG aspects of the game well, as Geralt is normally default neutral in the matters of men, and the Witcher being emotionless leads him to being the voice of reason when choosing momentous dialogue and story approaches. Though Geralt's English voice actor sounds an awful lot like Solid Snake, another no-nonsense soldier, Geralt's character profile, aided by player choice, gives him a lot of dynamic developments over the course of the complete 200-plus hour story and its various quests. Though strangely a Polish game, with an identity coalesced from diverse European literary references, the definitive true version of the Witcher universe must be with English voice acting, for only the English, armed with their original brand of slang at their cantankerous best, can swear and curse so coarsely, so eloquently, and so humorously.
And you've got a pike so far up your ass, you can't wear hats.
Fresh air's what I need, she says. So we came out here. Anything for my bunny. So instead of sucking air, she sucked off the postmaster in my ploughing bed. I can't take it no more.
The corpses, though. Else the rats will congregate to feast. Was the dwarves who popped Snow White's cherry. Fuck sure blame that on us too.
He's surrounded by splendid virgins who ply him with sparkling wine and pastries stuffed with nightingales' tongues. Come, Geralt, what do you think's happened to?
Wait and see, cunt. I'll carve your mug so not even a blind man will put his cock anywhere near it.
I'll do the cutting, you come any closer.
Wrong kind of lip.
Madman Lugos.
Calling Lugos a madman's an insult to madmen. He's a common goat fucker.
Call me a goat fucker one more time, and I'll chop off your head, stick it on a pike, and piss down your neck hole.
This quirky UK-style slander is one of a kind and couldn't possibly translate as effectively in another language. This is easily 10 out of 10 dialogue, not only thanks to ridiculous one-liners and general lovable trash speak, like the Baron's colorful language, which makes the world feel alive and authentically uncensored. But because CD Projekt Red seems to never repeat themselves as they turn the page, always coming back with some thoughtful and crafty prose that anchors the unique personalities of the characters and fuels the diverse story developments. Geralt has an assortment of sharp and witty dialogue options, which not only change the course of the events, but add contrast to the conversation and his character, such as when a random NPC's smartmouth questions Geralt's usefulness, and Geralt retorts to the naysayer, asking how many lives has he saved. Although there is not deep interactivity with general NPCs, their dialogue has such vibrant punctuation that the massive continental world feels very unique and atmospheric passing through. Of course, the characters of The Witcher 3 are all interesting in the ways they move and dress, but real memories are made with characters who have an assuredness to their demeanor and attitude in relation to their predicaments. This isn't to say that characters should be unchanging throughout the story, beholden to doubt and eternal conflict. Good characters should show growth and maturity from beginning to end. But good characters must give us, the audience, the sense that they belong, that they have a responsibility to their world, its events, and to their fellow participants. We get this feel that Geralt's journey for his long-lost surrogate daughter is meaningful, before we even get to know her as an adult. What makes his concern more poignant is that he is not the girl's birth father. He is a mentor, an adoptive guardian. Even more poetic is that a Witcher cannot make children of his own, and so Ciri is even more significant than a blood brood might be. Geralt's cause for concern at key moments in quests, whether at the directive of the player or the script, is believable beyond the blessing and curse that strips Witchers of their humanity, that informs us that Geralt shan't feel emotion. He may not feel much, but he certainly maintains the remembrance of what it was like to deeply care for those that helped shape his destiny. Caught in between a void of emptiness and the haywire emotional spectrum is a man whose grief is marked not by base human trauma, but the lack thereof. And that's what makes him matter to us. The player is there to feel for Geralt and all of the times when he struggles to. Then there's Ciri herself, an ambitious and foolhardy young woman, lacking neither courage nor heart, but restraint. When we first meet Ciri as a child, she is talented in game, yet unrefined, her mind wandering elsewhere on her future obligations and present formalities, which she would rather shrug off completely, as nearly any youth would. Then a jump in time ensues as Ciri disappears, in danger of poachers hungry for her magic energy bestowed by her lineage. It's Geralt who worries about Ciri's safety for pragmatic reasons. The girl who is, on the surface, the age-old MacGuffin damsel in distress, is not a danger to herself as much as she is to others, for she is more powerful than she could possibly know. This is shown to us intelligently through gameplay when we first get to control Ciri, whose mechanics are at first unfamiliar and then at once simple. We notice that she slays monsters in mere hits, dashing through all obstacles and regenerating health from any stray hits she takes in her stride. Ciri is more powerful than the main character, essentially turning her playable sections to easy mode. It's not Ciri who needs saving from the hunt as much as it is Ciri who needs saving from herself. As the story gradually develops, Ciri gains a sense of responsibility and trust to match her uninhibited vigor for adventure, to escape the shackles of royalty. Status and perceptions are a key element of Witcher 3's storytelling. Geralt is a freak of sorts that gets lambasted invariably by townfolk wherever he travels to. The common denizens thumb their nose at Geralt as he passes by. Geralt could use a business card as he constantly has to reintroduce himself as the Witcher, not so much as a badge of honor, but as an obligatory burden of guilt, which is sad given that he is a man on a path chosen for him, who just wants to help those he finds walking alongside him. Despite being the only hope for those in desperate need of monster exterminations and exorcisms of all sorts, Witchers don't get any respect at all from humans, who, despite their weakened states, feel morally superior for arbitrary reasons, like religion. These superstitions call into question the worth of the witches, mages, sorceresses, elves, dwarves, and more. Curious creatures that face persecution with extreme prejudice. It's this intrinsic conflict at the center of the main narrative that keeps Geralt's unique position in focus. He's an underdog of sorts, an outcast on multiple fronts, that is neither normie nor strange, but somewhere in between. The same can be said for the world of The Witcher 3, which is reminiscent of feudal Europe and the practicality of its design, with a touch of sorcery and oddity to set itself apart from being a simple period piece or a generic fantasy story, like the one we see at the end of the Blood and Wine DLC. The Witcher 3 gives us compound characters and intelligent storylines helmed by heroes and antagonists that delight and disgust us. Witcher 3's crowning achievement is universally regarded to be the elaborate, high-concept and high-testosterone quest design, with multiple faceted, if not profound, unexpected twists and turns determined by layered player intervention. With other games, it's always the same old shit. In Witcher 3, quests are complex and hearty, generally involving enjoyment and variety, with intriguing ancillary storylines and important rewards. Sometimes side quests get discovered inside of other side quests, and character fates as well as ending variations hinge on decisions and actions, with unseen, far-reaching consequences and follow-up references.
Happily ever after doesn't often happen in life, sadly.
The Bloody Baron's quest is absorbing, because we are not able to get a surefire read on the guy until deep in the story, which takes a dark and dramatic turn into a tale of domestic abuse and neglect which is anything but one-sided. On the face of it, a violent alcoholic abuser of a husband should suffice as a narrow-minded version of a contemptible asshole. However, in the real world, such volatile individuals such as those entangled in twisted human relations are seldom so simple to judge. As we learn more about the truth of the Baron Baron's family life, we begin to sympathize with this deeply imperfect slob because he is deeply human. He's been harmed as much as he has caused harm. Because the Baron harbors personal resentment towards himself with enough self-awareness, even as a drunkard, to offer self-evaluation to his own faults, we feel that he becomes relatable, and we want to help him become the better version of himself that he always deserved to be. As similar to the dwarf who hilariously became a cuck by the wife we never get to see on screen during the Hearts and Stone DLC, which ties in well with the main plot of that mini-story about the husband who sold his soul and his heart for immortality and lived long enough to regret his costly exchange. Men are often thought to be the worst offenders, especially when women are involved. But as any realist can point out, anyone who is human is capable of malice and betrayal. What makes the Bloody Baron quest truly compelling, beyond its realism and relatability, is the burden of choice Geralt and the player are met with in having to either spare the children of the swamp or the village people from the cannibalistic crones of Crookback Bog. Witcher 3 does what very few games have had the balls or the integrity to do: tell a story involving the dark side of child abuse. It's definitely one of the most horrifying thoughts and most disturbing plot developments I've seen in a game, to sacrifice the orphaned children of the bog to these evil parasites in order to maybe buy some time for the cursed villagers who already sold their souls and body parts in a pact of servitude, but still arguably deserve the benefit of the doubt because they have the advantage in numbers. It's a difficult and murky choice to make, especially since the player cannot know the full implications of the dilemma, or even that the decision could have such stark alternatives until after the choice is made and the quest is continued. It's a brilliant quest all the way through, with actual high stakes and moral reflection that serves as the perfect opener to The Witcher 3 and sets it apart from the typical copy and paste, mindless excursions in most open world games. There are a number of other mindful moments throughout The Witcher 3, but perhaps not quite as engaging as this initial storyline. One that comes close to the same level of profundity is the saga of Whoreson Jr., one of the funniest and most original character names in the game. The drugged-out prostitute-murdering degenerate, which Geralt has the option of executing or rendering a beggar. Almost every action that Witchman Geralt takes in this game seems to carry real weight in some form or fashion. Some alternatives offer the satisfaction of revenge or the warm feeling of compassion. Some are more logical. Some are more emotional, and almost always there's a curious alternative for which you want to reload a save to discover or experience on a subsequent playthrough. Perhaps The Witcher 3 isn't a true RPG, as if the term has any real meaning in today's landscape of games with all sorts of blanket labels thrust upon them, but it certainly nails down the sense of impactful decision-making about as close as a traditional game narrative can. Witcher 3 leaves you with as many memories as it does curiosities, which is what the nature of a role-playing adventure should offer.
See you later, Ciri. Actually kinda in the mood for cards. Care for a round of Gwent?
I'm always in the mood for Gwent.
Gwent, the relaxing turn-based strategy game, later turned into an official card game, is one of the original activities designed for, and later as a companion piece to The Witcher. It's pleasant to have an actually useful collectible list inside of an open-world game this large, and Gwent will probably go down as one of the best mini-games in collectibles in video games. There's a real sense of satisfaction, gradually collecting and selectively building and personalizing your deck of cards by playing against NPCs of varying strength for cash prizes and bragging rights. A lot of these NPCs are annoying fuckers that give you trouble by playing OP cards that you might not have the strength to contend with. So when you beat them, it actually pleases you. The world is also very detailed, with ongoing games of Gwent happening all over the place, with the face value of the cards clearly distinguished in plain sight, helping to tie everything in this universe together nicely and market the game in real life. While not as addicting as real-world card collecting, tracing the steps of all the available cards gets about as close to the same level of dopamine as randomized card collection can get, without veering off into gambling territory, which is what makes single-player escapism as important as it's ever been. As time consuming and time sensitive as it is to get all of the Gwent cards from various players, merchants, and quest lines, the game itself is enjoyable and largely self-explanatory, though with enough variation and specialized mechanics to help keep the game interesting and replayable almost each new game you throw down. For all the incredible achievements of The Witcher 3, there are of course some shortcomings that it needs to be called out for, like its basic and repetitive combat mechanics and some of the tedium and general gameplay elements that could and have been handled better in other open-world games. For example, given all the Witcher spells, why is it that Geralt can't cook his own food? I spent most of the early game foraging for raw meat when all the while my guy runs around with flaming fingertips. There is the fact that you can't pick up items when mounting a horse like you could in Red Dead 2. So I spend most of my time running around instead. The boss fights and crucial encounters are few and far between, with some truly infuriating boss design, including one that I contemplated being one of the worst designed bosses in video game history, and I faced this annoying teleporting dickhead. He reminded me of the Element Beast, which is not a favorable comparison. What makes this fight dumb is the general bad camera and lock-on system that insists on snapping to enemies that pop up at the rear. This shitty camera plagues Witcher 3 to this day, along with some of the game-breaking bugs which CD Projekt Red is notorious for at this point.
You do not deserve to live!
The final main game boss is marginally better because he teleports mostly to you instead of away from you, keeping you on your toes throughout the entire fight. And he has some intimidating dialogue that's really cool. As far as difficulty is concerned, of course, I experienced Witcher 3 on a maximum difficulty, as well as Blood and Bones and Give Me a Story, which I'm always extremely cynical seeing included in games. My thoughts on the difficulty are that yes, it does present a legitimate challenge, although only creating an artificial difficulty by math and not by switching up mechanics and movesets. It's good for what it is, as it does provide higher risk and reward scenarios, but it also goes to show how negligible the core mechanics of The Witcher 3 are, as I never really sought armor upgrades or skill upgrades because they simply weren't needed for me to progress. There were times when I legitimately required the help of potions and decoctions on Death March, and thus got to see a bit more of what the combat has to offer, but it was generally take it and leave it for me. This is often the problem of the player not being interested enough in the deeper mechanics of a game, but also a problem on the part of the designers that they didn't make it apparent that other playstyles were possible. For example, of course throughout the quests, there are times when intuition and deduction are required to solve particular puzzles, which are generally well designed for the same reason. The game doesn't always tell you expressly where to go or what to do to advance, but it is often clear that a particular sign is needed, either to break down a wall or to counter the element that a summoned monster shares an affinity with. There's some thought put into encounters, but rarely enough to actually make me think or sweat, apart from some huge difficulty spikes near the finale. Although there are various spells and gear items, the core combat of The Witcher 3 is mostly unchanged, even when factoring in these modifiers, which leads to this one component of the game remaining merely generic.
Fresh manure. Fresh manure. Fresh manure.
The one saving grace to this combat, which is typically poorly optimized in overworld games, is that the dismemberment RNG is continually satisfying and somehow doesn't bore me even after 200 hours, which is a good sign. This also reinforces the idea of unmitigated, raw experience that Witcher 3 pretty much nails in both its themes and presentation with unbridled nudity and gore. The combat can never be great in Witcher 3, but overall, it isn't terrible. It's simply in a category of could be a lot better. This does, however, drag the total score of the game down considerably since a video game usually needs to be a game first and foremost. This is a common critique that many other gamers have that I have no choice to echo because it's true. There are other, much deeper RPGs out there, so Witcher doesn't deserve full credit for doing something that it plainly phones in. Despite the generic Geralt combat, the world of Witcher 3 is exquisitely rendered and packed with amazing detail, and places you can actually go and explore from the inside. There are so many walk-in houses in Toussaint that I began to lose track, almost to the point of being overwhelmed, honestly. This is one of the most important aspects to creating immersion in open-world games, an aspect often lost on even some of the titans such as GTA, that may offer tons of distinct areas, but with a lack of buildings you can actually enter and engage with. The atmosphere in Witcher 3 never ceased to make me feel as though I was inhabiting a unique video game world, tied together with beautiful visuals and distinctly memorable soundtracks that permeate the environs. Adding up Velen, Novigrad, Skellige, and Toussaint, especially, and you have one of the best open world game maps of all time, and one of the best looking video games ever made. Thank you, ladies. It's up there with Red Dead 2 as the best open world period piece that I've seen, and in terms of quest design and overall writing, I think The Witcher 3 ends up clearing Red Dead 2. Witcher 3 is one of those games that much can be written about, but nothing much can be said or communicated properly without the person playing firsthand. Recently, I have pondered whether critics denote success due to their own personal experience or to show off to other critics. I take my ratings seriously because when a game as good as Witcher 3 comes around, we need to be able to put it into proper context. In my first few hours of Witcher 3, I had wondered how this game could have sold 50 million copies based on merit. But by the end of my 200-hour completionist journey, Witcher 3 won me over. And I am confident saying that Witcher 3 is not only a great game, but one of the best open world games ever made, and one of the top 69 games of all time on my list so far. The score breakdown is as follows, with a near perfect score in 9 categories, helping to make up for the lackluster combat that is largely forgettable. Like Geralt at the end of the masterful Blood and Wine DLC, one of gaming's greatest add-ons, the world-weary Witcher needs rest and relaxation. But maybe we'll see him again in a new venture someday soon. It would be nice because Witcher is CD Projekt Red at their best and most confident. It's times like these that maybe it's a good time to have an empty schedule, dry season of games. That way I can go back and play games like The Witcher again, because Witcher is a winner.
Do you have a little brother or a little sister? Where do babies come from?
What about me? If one says you're talking bollocks, they could be right. They could be wrong. But if multiples say you're talking bollocks, well, you probably are. So let's take a vote. Who else here thinks I'm full of it?
Where about Turgidum?
I guess I'll see you, Witcher. I'll miss you. A lot.
I'll miss you too.